Yo, what's up, crew? Man, I have someone really special here in the career chat today. A dear friend of mine. We go way back. We toured together, but he's also a veteran in the industry over multiple genres. I'm here with production manager Earl Neal. What's up, Earl?
Hey Ken, what's happening, man? It's good to see you.
Hey, thank you, thank you. I know it's been a little while. I know we've corresponded through texts and calls over the handful of years because we keep up with each other. But I'm just so grateful that you came on here because I know that you have a lot to share, a lot of value for the crew coach members here, and so I really appreciate you joining.
Oh man, happy to do it. Happy to do it.
And speaking of which, we go quite a years back. I mean, over a decade, I think by
Oh
now.
yeah, sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
we met probably back on Toby Keith, right? When you were with Trace Adkins, maybe?
Trace, or no, before that, Joe Nichols.
Joe Nichols, that's right.
No
Wow. So
crap,
yeah,
man.
it's been probably closer to 20 years, Ken.
Closer to 20 years. Wow. Well, hey, listen, I gotta tell you, I was right before we started recording, I was telling Earl here, I was reminding him dozen years or so ago, we did something similar to this in a hotel room in Banff, Alberta, Canada. Because I've always had a passion for helping people in their careers, and this is kind of like deja vu a little bit, Earl.
Yeah, except I'm sitting in my living room. The view's not near what it was at that
Oh,
hotel in Banff.
oh man, I gotta dig up that interview. I was definitely green in that interview, a lot less, a lot more rigid. But that's the whole thing about career growth. I tell my crew coach members, I've been called to kind of help serve and for many years, but you just have to kind of get started. You just kind of got to get started. It doesn't matter how great you are; you're not going to start great, that's for sure. And especially in any career path, but you have to get started. Speaking of which, you got started where in this industry and what year was that?
Well, before making my living, while I was in college, a buddy of mine and I owned a small sound company and a DJ company back in Kansas City. And then while I was in school, um, we were working at a hotel in Warrensburg, Missouri, doing a show with a band that we did sound for all the time. And Clint Black's group, which Clint Black was one of your former employers.
Yeah.
Uh, Clint Black was in town playing at the college, and his production manager at the time was Everett Leibolt, who is
Wow.
now a production coordinator, and actually I think he's assistant manager or assistant CEO of Sound Image. Um, but he was Clint's production manager at the time, and he and Aaron Tippin's production manager, Tim Prince, were both hanging out in the hotel bar where we were playing, and those guys started, coming up and asking me what I was doing there. Why wasn't I working somewhere else? There was better places to be mixing, and those guys ended up getting me my first gig, and that was in 1993. This is my 30th year in the touring industry.
Wow, man. So I completely understand that story because I'm kind of that guy to locals too, where I'm like, hey, have you considered doing it at my level? But let me
Yeah.
ask you a question though. That was your first gig, but before that, like before you owned your sound company and stuff, like when you were younger, like where were you even introduced to this world?
So I had two uncles that were quite a bit younger than my dad. Um, they're one of them was 18 years older than me, and one was like 22 years older than me. But neither of them had kids until late in life. And when I was young, I would go hang out with them because they would invite me over, to listen to music and stuff like that. We would have do sports stuff and that kind of thing. Yay, go sports! But uh, those guys really introduced me to showed me how to appreciate music.
Okay.
And once I got into, really digging music and buying albums and listening to music for more than just what was on the surface, really putting on headphones and listening close to what was going on in the music. Those guys were responsible for that. And I've always said that my Uncle Dick and my Uncle Jerry were integral in me becoming, working into the music industry. I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer, but after the first 3 years of school and being sick and tired of all the math and science, and we were doing the music stuff on the side, I realized that was probably where I wanted my career to go rather than the engineering direction.
Were you in college for engineering?
Yeah. I was going to college at Wichita State. And then I did a year and a half there. And then I moved to what is now UCM, or the University of Central Missouri. Back when I went, it was Central Missouri State University in Warrensburg, Missouri, which is the town where I met Tim and Everett. But I was studying aerospace engineering and aviation technology.
And then all of a sudden, what, like you needed some work on the side, or a friend of yours approached you about doing sound? I mean, because when I met you, you were the monitor engineer with Toby Keith. But how did you connect into production from aeronautic engineering?
Some buddies of mine had a band, and I'd never played really much. Toyed with drums a little bit, toyed with guitar a little bit, but never was a player. But had really close friends that were in a band, and they needed a sound guy and some sound gear. So my, at that time, business partner, because we bought the gear together, okay. We bought a bunch of gear together and started being their sound guy and, production company basically. And realized very rapidly that I could make my living doing that if I would just focus on it. And then when those guys offered me a position with a baby act, I couldn't pass up on it.
Yeah. I mean, did you like you just kind of knew, like you had some butterflies, you had like this excitement because dude, you were going to school for something real tangible. I mean, aeronautic engineering,
yeah,
that's a pretty tangible career path.
Yeah. Scared to death, actually, I mean, and thoroughly annoyed my parents by dropping out of school and moving to Nashville to be in the entertainment industry. But that rapidly changed. I realized pretty quick that if I was smart with what I was doing, I could easily make a living doing what I was doing. And then even faster than that, realized that I was green as grass, and figured out really fast that a lot of this industry is attitude and who not so much what
Right.
Being a solid person is so much more important in the touring industry than being fantastic at your job. You got to be good at your job, don't get me wrong, but being able to be lived with on a tour bus is I think, it's key. Absolutely.
Well, you obviously, I like to always say that it's more than just who it's who knows you. And obviously you made an impression on Everett and Aaron Tippin's sound people or crew as well. I mean, they were around your business partner too on those shows too, right?
Yeah, and he just had no interest in doing anything further than what we were doing at the time. And funny story, he's a video guy for Moo TV now.
Is that right?
And he only started touring about 5 years ago.
Wow, that's so funny.
But was not interested in it forever, and still did local stuff and things like that from that day until when he first went on tour, 5 years ago or so. Just wasn't interested in it. And then came to me and said, man, do you think you can find me a gig? Because I'm getting to be at the age where if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. And I really think it's something that I could get into.
Yeah.
And he's single, that that made a difference. I think if he
Yeah.
had had, a wife or family at the time, he probably would have never approached me about it. But
You're right, right. Yeah, because that's definitely a contributing factor. But however, if you have the pull to touring, man, that's a pretty powerful pull. Like it's hard to shake it, you know. Like if you
oh yeah,
have like somebody says, "Hey, you want to tour?" and you're like, "Wait a minute, that's a possibility." Like that's a hard pull on you. I assume that you felt that before you moved to Nashville.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the possibility. I think the travel was probably the biggest draw for me.
Mm,
Um, and then beyond that, I really did love doing sound, you know.
okay.
And the first time I got to really put my hands on a professional mixing console in a bigger room with a big PA, I was hooked. I mean, I knew that was where I wanted to be, you know.
I bet. Well, you came from a desire of engineering and that kind of understanding of that. So that's like engineering at your fingertips.
Right, right, exactly.
That's pretty cool stuff. So you moved to Nashville. I mean, was it a hard decision? And we'll move on from this kind of the phase of your career. But was it a hard decision, or was it easy to just be like, well, I'm dropping out of school, or did you have to sleep on it?
Oh no, I had it took me honestly, Everett and Tim both probably called me 6 times, uh, once every couple of weeks over a 3 or 4 month period
Gotcha.
before I was like, you know what, to heck with this, I'm gonna go and see what happens, you know.
Amazing. And you were how old then?
That was the end of 92 going into 93, so I was 21, 20, going on 22.
That's amazing, man. That's so cool, man. So you get to Nashville. Nashville back then was a pretty sleepy town because I remember when I moved to Nashville in 2005, it was still a pretty sleepy town. So I imagine Nashville back then, I mean, gosh, that was a real small town. I mean,
Oh
was it still the music production center that it is now, but a smaller scale or?
no, not really. I mean, obviously all the country acts were touring out of here, but there was, now Nashville is it doesn't matter what genre of music you're in. There are people here that are touring out of here in that genre for sure. Um, Back then it was primarily country. Now you had management companies that were handling acts in multiple genres, but you really didn't have the artists here and them tour rehearsing with their bands here and stuff like that. Most of that was still going on in New York and LA and Las Vegas and
Right.
that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, from an industry standpoint, it was tiny then. It had its legs, and you could see that it had its legs, but uh, all the record labels were in little houses on
Right.
16th and
Right.
17th Avenue, and now they're all nice big concrete and glass buildings. But
Yeah, I know, man. And I got to see a bit of old Nashville pushing into new Nashville because I was there for that decade from 2005 to 2015. Um, but when you got to Nashville, you got on your first gig. Like, how was touring in the 90s like that?
well, there's no cell phones. The I didn't have a cell phone until probably 97, 98. So the first 4 or 5 years, there were no cell phones. There were no satellite dishes on buses.
Right.
Uh, Most of the buses were not nearly as nice as they are now. And we thought they were great back then, but then when you look back at what we had compared to what we have now, completely different, But the big difference in touring probably was, I honestly, I think communication. You When you stopped for fuel, everybody ran in to grab a payphone and make phone calls home. Or if at the time, the first gig that I was the front of house engineer and tour managing for a baby act. And so, like, if we were running behind because of weather or something, I would have to run in and try to get a payphone and call the venue and say, hey, we're going to be an hour late or whatever it is. Um, if we had, bus trouble, we had to either walk to the nearest exit and hopefully there was a gas station there or something like that. I mean, there was no way to communicate outside of getting to someplace that had a landline. And beyond that, entertainment on the bus was way different. We were watching VHS tapes and, people would, people would record stuff at home and bring it out to watch and listen to CDs and cassettes. I mean, there were still cassette players on the buses then too. And
a lot more camaraderie, probably. I mean, there's forced camaraderie anyways, but I mean, you have a lot more time to talk. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, we would play cards all the time. That was a huge thing. I became a poker nerd for a long time because of all the cards that we used to play on the buses back then.
So you're touring as a front of house audio engineer and tour manager as a baby band. When did you take the next step in your career?
So the first probably 6 or 7 years was all just doing mostly audio. And the first act I was with, I also tour managed. But then after that, I was doing basically either mixing front of house sound or mixing monitors. And that kind of flowed in and out. At the time I was working for Clair Brothers too. So they were, a huge company, obviously, even back then. But another weird thing about Nashville is nobody worked in the wintertime. Especially baby acts, they just didn't tour in the wintertime. So in some winters I was working for a carpet cleaning company to make ends meet, and then the spring would roll around and the tours would pick back up and I'd leave and then come back and hit them again in the wintertime, and but for the first 6 or 7 years it was mostly all just audio, and then started to cultivate my my people that I was working with, started to dig more into, hey, I'm looking for a gig and it doesn't have to be audio. I can tour manage and I can production manage, but I would, prefer to stay as a sound guy. And that was what my plan was forever, was to primarily stay in audio. And then as the career moved on, I started to realize that if I was going to stay an audio engineer, I was going to have to stay with one of the major companies, and then I was going to be at the mercy of their scheduler to make sure that I stayed busy. And that became a problem for me. And when I left Clair Brothers and became an independent, freelancer, a lot more doors opened up. And it was more because people would, if people were talking about me in the background when I wasn't around, it was, oh yeah, he's an engineer at Clair Brothers or whatever.
Right.
And so they would go, oh, well, I'm not going to deal with, if they weren't a Clair account, I'm not going to deal with trying to go through Clair to get him, or whatever. And when people found out that I was freelancing, the phone calls were a lot more common.
Right. Do you feel like, though, being with Clair for as long as you did, like you were thriving up until that point, though, as much as you could? I mean, do you credit that experience with Clair for a lot of your validity?
100%. Absolutely. I mean, because that was how I built my resume, was them putting me on gigs and people seeing that I could stay on a gig for, a long period of time. Right. I could keep a client happy,
right.
Which ultimately, that's how we keep a gig, is we keep our client happy or our artist happy and make an impression, so that they remember who you are.
Well, that's kind of my point with, like, it's not so much who you know, it's who knows you. And you had a reputation where you were being talked about in the background, but it wasn't until you broke off and became a freelancer that you were really able to enter those conversations as available, right?
Right. That's absolutely right. And I think like you say, I think Clair was a huge stepping stone for me. But I think realizing that I needed to be on my own was even more important to my career moving on.
Was this when I met you in the early 2000s? Wow. I was probably 2003, I think, when I met you, Toby Keith.
3 or 4, yeah.
3 or 4. Were you a Clair employee then?
No, that was so at that time I had been a Clair employee, or I had gotten away from Clair in the late 90s.
Okay.
And I had probably 6 or so years there where I was independent. And then when I met you, when I started with Toby, I hired on with Sound Image. So I was a Sound Image employee then. And that was one of those things where I had worked with 3 people in Toby's band on different artists. And they were looking for a monitor guy, and they kept bringing my name up. And so Everett, again, came back to Everett Leibold, who basically brought me to town, reached out to me and was like, would you be interested in going to work for Sound Image? I can put you on this Toby Keith thing. And it wasn't a true salary gig, but it was a work week salary gig. So if I worked a day or 7 days, I made the same pay rate, you know, on those gigs. And, you know, that put me into a position with Sound Image where I was for almost 15 years.
Yeah, and let me ask you then, because there you were for 6 or 7 years as a freelancer. You were independent. You were, you know, hustling up your opportunities. Things flourished for you, obviously. Why go back to being a company guy? Was it Everett? Was it the opportunity? Because it obviously wasn't just the artist. I mean, I know you were with Toby Keith for a long time, but like, what really brought you back to employment?
So I had a couple of other friends that had gone to work, that had been independent also and gone to work at Sound Image. And Sound Image is structured a little different than Clair was. They obviously had work for you. You know, they tried to keep you busy as often as they could if you were a valuable employee to them. But Clair was very strict about you not working outside the company back then.
Yeah.
Still
are, really.
Yeah. And Sound Image was kind of the opposite. They were like, yeah, man, come in and work with us. But you know, if you have other work, just make sure we know what your schedule is, and we'll fill in around it if we can. Now, the fortunate thing was, once I started with them, they kept me slammed busy, as busy as I wanted to be. I mean, I could turn stuff down because, you know, they were well, booming at the time. You know, they were blowing up. They were growing into being the second largest sound company in the world
at the time. Now, I know, and sorry to interrupt, but I know now, like, Sound Image still has a reputation. I don't know how busy they are anymore. I mean, I know they stay pretty busy between their West and East Coast, but like, I know that they have a real reputation of quality gear and people.
Yeah. And man, that was one of my favorite things about working there was, at Clair Brothers, everybody seemed like they were scared that you were going to take their gig. And when I was working for Sound Image, everybody was all about making sure that everyone in the shop knew how to do everything in the shop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was a very educational experience too. Like when they would bring new pieces of gear in, they wanted to make sure everybody learned how to use it, you know? And all of the guys were all about helping one another learn, you know, new skills, or like I say, learning a new piece of gear, or you know, nobody was afraid that some younger guy was going to take their gig away from them, you know.
They're still kind of like that though, right?
Absolutely.
I remember I used them when I was production managing Amos Lee. We had Sound Image out there, And I mean, it was kind of the same thing. Like I had hired a freelance front of house engineer, Joey,
Right.
and they just opened up their doors to him and said, "Hey, man, yeah, come down here and learn the console. Spend as much time as you need. Like our shop is your shop." And I thought that was just such a really cool thing from a company like that.
Yeah, and they're still that way to this day. Um, they're still one of my go-tos. If I haven't been working directly under them since 17, so I've been away about 6 years. But they're still, they're my go-to in town, because they have fantastic people and they're good to work with, and their gear is always well taken care of. It's packaged properly. It's easy to tour with,
I mean, what's your biggest qualifier when it comes to working with specifically a company like that? Like what is, because I always tell my crew coach members, like when you're building a career, you're not just getting hired by this company, you're actually also hiring them to make sure that they're the right fit for your career vision. What is your biggest qualifier? Because dude, you're a very prominent veteran in the industry, especially by this point. You could have went with any of these different companies that were booming at the time. What was your biggest qualifier?
When I first sat down with Everett and was on the phone with Dave Shadone, the owner, they instantly made me feel like a member of the family and not just a number on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
One of the first things they did was give me a company phone book that had every person that worked for the companies, either their home number or their cell phone number, and an email address. So if I needed to talk to anyone, I could call them or go to them directly. I didn't have to, fish for an answer, and that was really important to me. I mean, it made me feel welcome and let me know that they weren't worried about us talking amongst one another about work. You know what I mean?
Right.
And a lot of companies don't want that to be going on.
They want you to go to their direct manager or the
right.
manager, and there's like a chain of command, and it's really split up like that.
And Sound Image functions that way, but they don't take the ability for you to, like I never felt weird about getting on the phone and calling Dave Shadone, the owner.
Yeah.
Dave would come out to shows sometimes and he'd come hang with all of us, when we were with the Perrys and had Sound Image as our provider.
Yeah, I remember I've hung out with Dave actually.
Yeah.
Everett and Dave have both reached out to me independently for different reasons about feedback about some of their crew.
Yeah.
And because they're very serious about making sure that they're taking care of their people and their people are taking care of their clients. And they themselves were the ones that even reached out to me at the time, which I was just the stage manager, but they wanted my opinion.
Sure.
Pretty neat.
Yeah. And that's, they again, they made me feel like I was at home, and it's the only company I've worked for since, since 2003.
Is Toby Keith the last gig that you kind of did long term with them, or
no? The Band Perry was.
Oh, that's right, the Band Perry. But
the whole time
you were more freelance with the Band Perry, though.
Well, so that was another thing that was really cool about working for Sound Image. I wasn't mixing. Initially I was mixing when I started with the Band Perry, but even after I converted over to production managing, they were still allowing me to get paid through them on their insurance, on my 401k with them.
Yeah.
All of that was still viable from them, even though I wasn't really mixing or doing anything audio related at the time. And again, that's something that, a lot of other sound companies wouldn't have been interested in at all.
Yeah, no, they would have been like, nope, it's us or them.
Yeah, either if you're going to mix, then you can stay on payroll. Otherwise, you need to work through the artist direct,
Right.
And they didn't do that. They kept me on payroll and kept me on like I say, insurance, 401k, all the benefits, even
Yeah.
though I wasn't mixing. And it was, that was amazing.
That is amazing. Now, you took your first production management gig. Was that after your stint at Sound Image, or I mean, obviously, kind of during it? I guess you just answered my question. But what was that first PMing gig for you?
Um, so actually, first just PMing gig was while I was with at Sound Image, and that was the Van Perry.
Okay.
I had done, mixing and PMing gigs and stuff like that off and on all through the years. Um, but taking on the PM only gig, that was a step. It was difficult at first too. It was hard to give up the console,
Okay.
because I had made my living as an audio guy. Um, but I had cultivated those relationships, and I knew, most of the buyers, and
Mhm.
had relationships with the Live Nation people and stuff like that through doing gigs for sound image artists. And so it was a difficult transition, but only from like my mentality standpoint,
Right.
of letting go of the audio side and focusing primarily on show advances and logistics and things like that.
In design stuff. I mean, I know the Perrys at
Yeah.
the time, we were so busy and had a bunch of crazy stuff that we were doing, shows all over the place at the time. So there was a lot of logistics and stuff to figure out. I mean, did you doubt yourself, or did you have any insecurities with you coming through? I mean, obviously you did the work well and you had your relationships, but like what internally was going on with you?
Um, the biggest internal struggle at that time was initially a fear of letting them down, because I had already worked for them for a couple of years, and we had a really good relationship, and I didn't want to let them down or disappoint them. And so and it was just there no other reason than I was just concerned about it. It wasn't that I doubted my abilities, but more doubted I more doubted my use of time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You start to realize when you're PMing that the time that you spend doing your job is more spent at home than on the road.
Yeah,
Um,
no doubt. Or in your hotel room from
or
day.
in your Yeah, and that was probably my biggest concern. Was I always felt like I was always questioning myself whether or not I was spending enough time on getting everything done.
I can
I
imagine.
never felt like I didn't get anything done, but I was still always questioning myself whether or not I was done with everything that I needed to be done with.
Well, and there was, and as I mentioned, because I was obviously there before you, and then I remember when you came on board, because you kind of came on board as our front of house engineer first, right?
Yep, that's right.
And then you kind of took over. I remember the PM gig. And I do want to bring this up. You probably know what I'm going to bring up, maybe, because look, this is about career and career chats. And most of career is built in relationships with people. The gigs itself, the skill set and stuff like that, most of that stuff's relatively straightforward. But like, I know personally, I was going through some personal crisis I kept bringing to the gig, as well as I had a bit bigger ego. And me personally, I just want to bring this up for my crew coach members. So I talk a little bit about this. But I gave you a bit of a hard time there for probably a good solid year, right?
Yeah, but
Come on, Earl.
yeah, you did. It was, but it wasn't. I mean, there was never anything malicious about it. It was just you were very. I think more than anything, you were feeling like you were being overused and underappreciated.
Well, that's definitely for sure. Generally in the camp, I mean, God, I was the guy and doing everything for a very long time.
Yeah. Um, and I
So I
think
left.
that was really the only thing that you ever where I ever felt like you would, be short with me or anything like that would be when there were things going on like that, where, either I asked you to do something that you felt like maybe wasn't your gig, or there was a point in time when they were talking about transitioning you away from stage management and bringing on another stage manager, which we ended up doing. And that, I can remember a couple of times, well, I'm not the stage manager, you should go talk to the stage manager about that. And, those kind of things. And with good reason. But that's the only things I really remember you ever being short about or anything like that. It was, we've always had it.
I think you're probably being a little bit nice, because I'll tell you, from my aspect, it was, yeah, you're right. I mean, it was definitely some of that where I was pushing and pulling on my ego too, because before that, it was like, man, I was taking care of everyone, not even writing notes on my set list. Like, it was all up here. And I thought I was doing a really solid job with everything. But yes, you were right. I was nonstop. I mean, some days I didn't eat, because I was either restringing or taping or doing something relative to it all, for sure. And I know that the delegation of trying to split it off was just in efforts to kind of relieve some of this pressure. But also, I was also at the time like taking complete control and ownership. It was like, well, I mean, I've been doing it, and your job was to come in here and to manage the production in a positive way. But it was some of that kind of like trying to, just lay down some of my boundaries and borders. But I can imagine, though, like, it had to be frustrating, because there was a period of time there, Earl, where I was like, I wouldn't even give you the time of day or respect you in your position.
Yeah, honestly, Ken, that's probably true. I got to be honest with you, man. I don't really remember much of that. I tend to turn that shit off. Yeah. When it starts to become, when things like that start to become a burden, I throw them to the back of my mind, and I just do my gig and keep my head into what I've got to get done, and figure that it'll settle itself out, Yeah. And usually it does. And if it doesn't, then we move on from there and figure out a different way to approach it, but
no, and that's actually true, because what ended up happening was, I remember it was like one day, probably a year or so of just kind of having this combative relationship with you. I remember one day coming up to you doing, hey man, can I talk to you? And you were like, sure, what's up? And I was just like, man, I don't know why we're having this beef anymore. I forgot why I was supposed to be upset at you, but I can't do it anymore. And then I think we were just kind of like, I appreciate you. And we had like a great relationship from then on.
Yeah. I do kind of remember that. I don't remember the exact how it all came down, but I do remember us having a day where, all of the animosity is a bad word, but all the negativity between us kind of going away.
Yeah.
And that was probably, there was probably close to a year there where it was kind of funky. Yeah.
Yeah, it was silly. Well, and I, like I said, I admit it was a lot from just my perspective and how I was dealing with the transitions, and because I had been with them, from the very start of from their first bus, and then as we kept getting new people and all of that, like, I just kept saying yes to as many things as possible to help them, because Steve and Marie and their vision was so big for what they wanted with everything, and they needed all this help. But you said it right. Like, in my regard, it was absolutely the fact that I was overutilized and underappreciated, because I would have continued to do the work, but boy, it was like, remember we used to get those yearly reviews and the raises.
Yeah.
They would take us all down to the studio in Music Row, and they'd bring us in there, and they would tell us how good or not good that we were doing, and then they would give us like a quarter raise or something like that, and you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, that's what we gave everybody. I'm like, so I'm just like everybody here to you.
Yeah. It
was a trip, man. Well, great experience. It was a good learning curve. I just wanted to kind of bring up that situation because relationships are so key, man. And through all of that, here we are all of these years later, still continuing to have a really great relationship. You and I have done business together on the side of this as well. And so from that experience, you stayed on with the band Perry till the ship went down, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. The last few things I did with them was helping them get moved into their place in LA when they were finishing up the pop record.
Right. Wow. What made you stay that long? I mean, you knew it was going. I mean, it was just the people, or
Yeah, I mean, I really, well, like you were saying, they were fantastic people. They really were. They had nothing but good intentions. They treated me fantastic. I can't say anything bad about how anything went down. I mean, like I was telling you earlier, I went and saw Kimberly yesterday.
yeah.
And so still have a good relationship with all of them. And honestly, I was hoping that it would pick back up and they would move on, you know?
Right. Actually do the pop thing even.
Yeah. But honestly, the best thing that happened was when we decided to cut ties, and I moved on because it pushed me more into I'd done some pop and rock stuff before, but it pushed me into the pop and rock world some more. I did Kid Rock after that and Peter Frampton and.
Right. So you production managed Kid Rock after that. You production managed Peter Frampton, which you still work with Peter Frampton, right?
Yeah, just finished some stuff with him last week.
And you've also been the production manager for Jason Aldean.
Yep, I've been with Jason for 2 years now.
That's mega, man. I mean, what like do you feel like you miss doing audio at all? I mean, are you so now in this new craft, this new artistry with production management? Because it's its own discipline.
Sure. Yes, I still miss audio sometimes. And I've been fortunate in that I got to mix Peter Frampton for a couple of shows because our front of house guy had to go away. Right. I've mixed a couple of things for Jason. That's been great. So I still get a chance to throw my hands on a console every once in a while. And when I do, that's when I miss it.
Right.
If I've been away from it for a while, it doesn't even really come into my head at all. But when the call comes down and they go, hey, can you mix this? Because, Chris is not going to be here or whatever. Then my mind goes back to, man, I really do enjoy that side of it.
Right.
But I really love what I do too. The one thing that I can say about my entire career is I've never once dreaded getting up and going to work.
Yeah.
It's always different. It's always enjoyable. It's hard work sometimes. Hell yeah. I mean, this last Jason tour, we were 12 trucks and the stage manager and I were getting whatever sleep we could get between gigs. And, we were 7 o'clock walk and chalk and most of the time not out of the building until 2 or 2:30. Wow. So, we were 4 hours of sleep a night, maybe, on good nights. Mm. And that's tough, but still never, wouldn't trade it for anything. Right. It's just rewarding, when you walk out on the stage at the end of the day and your artist is getting ready to go on and there's 20,000 people in the crowd going ape shit. I still get goosebumps at that. And that's when that stops is probably when I'll quit touring. Yeah.
Which probably won't end, man. Because I mean, I've been pulled off the road and I get back doing it and kind of feel that same thing. It's just like, oh man, like I know why I'm doing it as well. And I want to actually ask you real quick, because I know that you need to go soon. I want to ask you about hiring and staffing, because now as a production manager, I mean, you've called me to do some one-offs and things like that, and I haven't been available, but like, how do you go about it these days? I mean, it's obviously, I have this thing called the 3 circles of referral where I talk about its relationships, and you ask your immediate circle, then the next circle, and the next circle. But like, what happens when, especially during the pandemic and after the pandemic, where it was really scarce to find good people that you knew or someone else knew? What do you do now about staffing the tours that you're on?
Man, it's tough. We went through 3 guys last year to find a final new backline tech.
Okay. What was the issues with the other ones?
Attitude, or I mean, it was never their work ethic. It was always the getting along with people, or we had one that was just could not say anything that wasn't a lie. You know what I mean? Like, just constant lying. And those kind of things. It was all, getting along or doing the day-to-day stuff that we couldn't get around with them. And then we found a guy that was the perfect fit. But I have a huge database of people that do everything.
Right.
And after the pandemic, I bet 30% of them are no longer in the industry. At least 30% of them are no longer in the industry, and put notes in there, well, this guy's not really doing it anymore. Doesn't mean I don't call them.
Right. I know that one. You still try to lure them back in. You sure you don't want to just come out for a show?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's very difficult. Most of what I do is I'll go through my database first. And if it doesn't turn up anything that's helpful, then I turn to other PMs and TMs and, hey, who do you know that's looking for this gig? Or have you heard of anybody that's looking for this kind of gig? And then, we talk through those circles. And other people, not just PMs and TMs, but I've reached out to you before. Hey, I'm looking for a backline guy. And not even necessarily that, I've reached out to people in audio asking them if they know of a lighting guy that's available, but just people that I know have toured for a long time and know a lot of folks.
Right.
Because everybody talks,
Yeah. That's the safest bet, because there's a lower risk for you, or at least as low as it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Versus like just hiring somebody that has just entered the industry that nobody knows. Yeah.
Right. Or some that's like, hasn't really done the networking. Maybe they've done, or the relationship building. Maybe they've been in the industry for a while, worked with 1 or 2 artists, but like they just really never call people. They never really connect.
Right.
And they just don't know people. I've been actually coaching some people like that have been with the same artist for, say, like 10 years. And then all of a sudden they're trying to make a move, but they realize like, oh shoot, I just never talked to many people outside my little camp.
Right.
Never made those connections. And so a bunch of people just kind of is like, well, I don't know. They don't know that person because they haven't really got out there to really build those relationships. What do you think the key factor is, if you could advise our crew coach members, whether they're just getting going, or maybe, because I have a lot of crew coach members here that are also very experienced, that are trying to just figure out how to really lock in and connect the dots with relationships and networking and the gigs, and like, what do you think some of the key factors or a factor is in solidifying their place in this industry?
Something that was really hard for me in the beginning. Step out of your comfort zone with people. When I first got into the industry, I was constantly just talking with audio guys. That's the only people I ever talked to, the guys at Clair Brothers, or I also did some studio work, and I talked with other engineers at the studio. Man, get to know the musicians, get to know the tour managers and the production managers. Make it a point to, obviously don't interrupt them or anything, but if there's a downtime in the afternoon, go sit and talk to your production manager or your tour manager and find out, what they're about, talk to them. Try to not stay in your same circle. That was probably, I think, integral into me being able to move along as well as I have over the years. And I was ravenous for learning what was going on in other departments too. I really enjoyed getting a grasp of, what does video do every day besides getting everybody's way? What what does what does lighting do? And
Why does
yeah.
backline show up at noon? No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, I think, and it was difficult for me at first, but yeah, step out of your comfort zone and getting to know the rest of the departments that you work with.
Man, you hear that, crew? I mean, he just said, he didn't say you should learn a new software or console or a type of light or some sort of certification. He said, step outside your comfort zone with your relationships. That's how you really solidify your place in this industry. That's it, man. That's awesome advice, man.
Yeah, and it was difficult for me. It really was, and it's probably going to be difficult for some of your people.
Yeah.
But I tell you this though, once they make that move, they'll probably become like I was too. They'll want to know more about what those people do because it'll become interesting to them. And that will definitely put them higher in those other people's minds because they're like, well, he was a sound guy, but he was really interested in what we were doing from a lighting standpoint, or whatever it is.
Yeah, man. Then actually, when you were saying this, it got me thinking when I was on Toby Keith. Sure, I was like trying to get with the Guitar Tech Ripper to get him to show me some things, but something I was also doing was I was helping the LED guys like fly their matrix screens and like try to jump in with lighting and help them. I was just doing it because I was doing it because I could and I wanted to connect with as many people as possible. I had fully intended just to stay in backline, but yeah, you're right. Like that produced a whole bunch of credibility and validity and cross connection. I mean, even you remembered me from days, all those years.
Yeah, man. That's right.
Man, that's interesting stuff, man. Well, Earl, dude, thank you so much. I know that you got a lot going on. You got Jason Aldean going back out soon, I assume?
Yeah, we start back up in June. We've got some one-offs, coming up, but touring actually starts in June.
That's awesome, man. That is awesome. Well, I hope to get to see you sometime this year.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, man, I really do, and I appreciate you. I love you. You're
love
awesome.
you too, brother.
Yes, man, and I'll continue to keep pushing your buttons and keep reaching out to you to contribute. Something that, by the way, something that we never talked about was Earl's got a bunch of side businesses that he's been able to do on top of this career, much like myself. But Earl's got an in-ear company. You still have the in-ear company?
Yes and no. We lost our lab during COVID. So I have a company that is helping me with repairs and stuff like that, but they don't have enough staffing to take on building for me right now.
I got you. So servicing past ears, basically.
Yeah. We still hope to get it back up and rolling again. But yeah, that's kind of a sore point. We are still building road cases though.
You're still building, you got a road case company, a variety of stuff, man. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, there's so many ways to serve in these different areas. And as you start to really develop your career and you really get solid at your core role as audio or production or whatever, you can start to branch out and really help in other areas of the industry that serves your interests. It's a really cool industry to be a part of. Do you think that Nashville will for just kind of forever be your home till you're done?
Yeah, I love it here. The people are fantastic. The city's great. It's Southern hospitality is a real thing. If you've never been to the South, people, I'm not originally from the quote unquote South, but Southern hospitality is a real thing, and Nashville is a beautiful place to live. It really is. And
the music production side of things is only getting bigger. It seems
only getting bigger. Yeah. Absolutely.
I've been tempted to move back, man, but I just can't do it. I love Tampa. So,
man, my wife and I my sister lives in Cocoa and my cousin lives in Jacksonville, and we go to Florida a lot, man. I love it down there. It's just, at this point in my career, it's a little too far away from everything.
I can understand that, man. And that's the thing. It's like you work in that Nashville bubble because it kind of is a bubble. You kind
Yeah,
of need to be in it. I know I thrived when I finally moved to Nashville. I ramped up things and started to thrive even more. But there are a lot of those bands that like you work with, like you have to live in Nashville.
yeah. I mean, Jason, for instance, we do so much stuff in town that is last minute and on the spur. On just off the cuff. You kind of have to be here. And when I was doing pop and rock and roll, it really didn't matter. They don't care. They'll fly you from anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
But country acts country acts do a lot have a lot more commitment to radio and things like that than pop and rock do. And so it puts them into a different position, and you're needing to be available to them is more important. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, there you go, folks. You want to work in country, or you just want to be a lot more in the mix, man. Nashville is a wonderful place to be. Because to be honest with you, Earl, it took me a lot of years to be able to build a relationship to where I'm getting called and flown out to all these big tours. Let's be honest. I mean, yeah,
sure.
I had to really position myself in the mix of things first before I was even up for like just getting flown across the world to start tours.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely true.
well, again, Earl, thank you so much for being a part of this crew chat. I know the crew coach members here really appreciate you as well. And hey, crew coach, if you have a takeaway or something that you really appreciated or learned from Earl in this career chat, just post it in the thread below. And until next time, go get them.